Welcome to H-Frame, the only comprehensive, entirely unofficial guide to vintage Black & Decker Workmates. The website is hframe with a hyphen .weebly.com, where you will find my in-depth documentation, over 60 web pages, over 100 PDF documents, over 500 photographs, and still growing. Content of this video will be a little different from my other videos. This is actually a bit of a celebration to mark, if not a conclusion, at least a major turning point in my exhaustive documentation of the Workmate 79001. In the space of about 2 recent months, I made discoveries that completed 3 specific remaining goals that had long eluded me. All 3 pertain to the 79001 Type 3 and its near twin, the Type 5, which were made in Ireland and imported to the US in very small numbers in the late 1970s. Because they never appeared in Black & Decker print materials, with one minor exception, and because so few of them were sold, they have been the most frustrating workmates to document. I'll start off showing the 3 79001 Type 5s that I now own, and then go on to explain what I have deduced about the production dates of the Type 3 and Type 5. The Type 5 is by far the rarest Workmate 79001, so the hardest to document. At the time I bought my first one in early 2023, I had found and documented only one other in years of searching online across the US. In the following 16 months after that, I bought 2 more, and an owner of another Type 5 contacted me through my website, sending photos, making a grand total of only 5 known Type 5s, 3 of which I have right here for this video. This is the 79001 Type 5 I showed in my previous video. I found it in the terrible condition you see in this photo, 700 miles away on Facebook Marketplace. I wanted a Type 5 so badly that I paid close to $200 to buy it, including commercial, packing, and shipping. I knew from the photos that it had a broken vise handle, but fortunately everything else turned out to be intact and working. I found a used original replacement handle on eBay and paid $75 for that, with more than half of that being the shipping cost from the UK. I spent many hours disassembling the Workmate completely down to its individual parts, removing rust on steel parts, heavy oxidation on the aluminum parts, and paint spray and spills on the wooden and bare metal parts. I chose not to repaint it because I wanted it to stay as original as I could keep it. So this is what my first Type 5 looks like today. You can see an in-depth examination of it in my earlier video covering both the Type 3 and Type 5. I was happy to have finally found this rare Workmate, but was disappointed in particular with the markings. For all of the other 9 types of the 79001, I have been able to find excellent examples with undamaged labels and clear ink stamps to use for my photo documentations. On this Type 5, the original label for the jaws is completely gone, and the ink stamp on the bottom with the model and type numbers on the bottom of the jaws is so faded that it's mostly unreadable. But then, within about a month of posting my video for the Type 5, another Type 5 came up, this time on eBay, only about 45 miles. That's what you see here. It does have some damage, a narrow slice off the end of one jaw from an errant saw cut, It also has some typical rust spots and some paint overspray. However, of the 3 Type 5s that I had found up until then, it does have the first nice clear ink stamp on the bottom of the jaws, so I had to have it. In addition, careful examination even finds a tiny remnant of the paper label, which you can just barely read. At the bottom edge of it, it says 001 Type 5. I paid $160 for this one with shipping. Because of our proximity, the seller was already going to be passing by my area, so he agreed to deliver it to me at a meeting point less than 10 miles from my house at no charge. I've done almost no work on it at all. It's almost exactly as I bought it. Still needs a good cleaning and lubrication one of these days. When I bought it, I intended to do all that, but I put it off for so long that, you guessed it, another Type 5 came up on eBay, one that fully measures up to the quality of my other 79001s. This one was shipped to me from Pennsylvania with a total cost just under $200. It is in wonderful condition with minor signs of use, but all the surfaces, whether painted or otherwise, look nearly new. Most importantly to me, it has both a completely intact Type 5 label on the jaw and a dark clear ink stamp on the bottom of the jaws. Here's a good look at the ink stamp. It's a bit different from the stamps on other 79001s in a way that indicates it must have been stamped at the factory in Ireland rather than at Brockville, Ontario. First, you see that it says WM 79001. None of the Workmates made in North America at this time used the WM prefix on their model number, but it was used on all the UK models from the beginning. The very first WM125, the WM225, 325, 525, and so on. The second difference is that it doesn't say Type 5 the way the North American made Workmates did. Instead, it says E05. This was consistent with the way that the various types were marked on the WM625s made in Kildare, Ireland. WM625, of course, as I've mentioned elsewhere on my website, my videos, is what this Workmate was when it was sold in its home market of the UK. So finally, I had my long sought after 79001 Type 5 in great condition. Of course, with it being over 45 years old, it was too much to expect it to be perfect. It had 3 problems of its own. First, it was very hard to open and close. I tried to fix it by lubricating every possible sticking point I could find with no success. Finally, I discovered that one of the screws attaching the H-frames had been over-tightened. Loosening that one screw a fraction of a turn solved the problem. Second, one of the latch hooks that should hold the Workmate folded was bent so it wouldn't engage with the frame. This meant the Workmate could come unfolded at very inconvenient times, such as when carrying it. A somewhat common problem I fixed on other Workmates. I drilled out the rivet that holds the hook, bent the metal tab back where it should be, and riveted the hook back in place. Third problem was a little more difficult. I can't quite show it to you here, but the end was snapped off one of the spring steel clips that hold the folding legs open. That leg would just flop around when the Workmate was open, making it very awkward to set the Workmate up, to put it away, and to move it around while using it. To fix this, I replaced the clip with one from my first Type 5, leaving it with a floppy leg for now. It was obviously a huge advantage to have more than one of these Workmates, so I could pull a spare part off an older one. Since then, I've been in touch with another Workmate owner who was offering me a used original replacement clip from a compatible UK model. So I expect to have my first one fixed up again before long. So this was the first of my 3 recent goal completions. Acquisition of excellent examples of all 10 types of the Workmate 79001 after starting that quest over 5 years ago. The 2 remaining goals involve production dates. One of my goals from the start of my Workmate documentation project was to figure out when the various 79001s were made. My first breakthrough was realizing that the multi-character ink stamps on early Workmates tell their production date. These codes seemed to be unique to the Workmate 79001s made in Brockville, Canada. Type 1, 2, 4, 6, 7, 8, and 9. So I refer to them as the Brockville production code. I explain these codes to some extent in my other videos and detail at my website. Since the Type E, Type 3, and Type 5 were made in the UK, I reported that they did not have these codes to date them. One thing I learned from the codes found on Type 2, Type 4, and Type 6, the 3 types that sort of surround the Type 3 and Type 5 in the lineup, was that there was no gap in the dates between the Brockville made types. That is, when Type 4 production ended, Type 6 production started immediately. This tells us that the UK Workmate WM625 that was imported and sold as the 79001 Type 5 was probably never on the market all by itself, but it must have supplemented North American sales during some part of the production period of the 79001 Type 4. Similarly, the earlier WM625, imported as the Type 3, must have supplemented sales of the 79001 Type 2. From this and information about the start of WM625 production at the factory in Ireland, I was able to narrow down the dates of the Type 3 to a period from the spring of 1976 to June 1977, and the Type 5 to a period from June 1977 to October 1978. However, I believed that the production dates for those 2 types were actually much shorter. For a long time, that was all I could deduce about the dates of the Type 3 and Type 5. So what did I figure out in the last couple of months? To my surprise, it turns out Brockville codes do help us date the Type 3 and Type 5. When I bought my third Type 5 a couple of months ago, I had a revelation. It came about because that was my first Type 5 that included swivel pegs. I knew that the swivel pegs had changed several times during the first few years of the 79001, and I had documented the dates of each change in the pegs by using the Brockville production codes of the Workmates they were found on. While examining my newest Type 5, I realized that the converse applies. I could determine the approximate date of a workmate by the style of the swivel pegs it has. Here I've got the third, fourth, and fifth styles of swivel pegs that were used on U.S. workmates from 1974 to 1977. It's kind of hard to believe they changed the swivel pegs that many times in just a few years, but they did. Here on the left is the third style. You can see that the legs on the swivel pegs of the third type are longer than the later ones. They are also, they form a part of the front and the back of the peg as it's inserted in the hole. Next is the fourth style. The legs are shorter, and now the legs are on the sides of the peg instead of the front and the back of it. The face of the swivel peg, the fourth one, is also just a hair larger than the third one, I believe. Then on the right is the fifth style. The base portion of it is pretty much the same as the fourth one. The major difference is at the top. If I can get it back here, you can see at the top it has a couple of little wings that stick out on the side, and the face is actually a little bit taller than on the fourth one. The wings make it easier to grip it and pull it out of the hole when it's in use. I checked the pegs on my Type 5 and found that they were of the fourth style that was sold for only about a year. I quickly went and checked the photos I have of two Type 5s from other owners. Luckily, both of these had their swivel pegs. They were shown clearly in the photos, and they matched the style of mine, telling me that at least three, out of only 5 Type 5s known to exist, have the same style of swivel pegs. That style was used from October 1976 to October 1977. This knowledge shortened the possible production period of the Type 5 to run from as early as the introduction of the Type 4 in late June 1977 through as late as the discontinuation of the fourth style of swivel pegs in October 1977. However, given how few Type 5s exist, this still seemed like too long a period. I decided to review my spreadsheet of workmates with documented production codes to examine the pattern of exactly when Type 4s were made during that June to October period in 1977. Very quickly, I found an unusual gap in my data, with no documented Type 4s apparently produced for 3.5 weeks, covering most of the month of July 1977. Well, I can't call that conclusive proof, but it's enough that I'm willing to speculate strongly that the month of July 1977 may have been the entirety of the short production period of the 79001 Type 5, thus giving us a perfect explanation of its rarity. At that point, I was thrilled to complete a second goal, but there was one more to come. A couple of weeks later, I had my revelation about the Type 3. Type 3 does, in fact, have a truncated version of the Brockville production code. It was there in plain sight all along. Format of the code is different on the Type 3. It is only 3 digits long, and it appears at the beginning of a single line mark. It also shows the model and type numbers, like mine, that reads 621-79001 type 3. Format is different enough that I didn't recognize the first 3 digits on the type 3 could be a date code. Unfortunately, I was misled by the fact that the first type 3s that I found all had the same 621 on that line. That, combined with the different format, led me to think it was a prefix to the model number, possibly a factory code for the Kildare, Ireland factory, rather than a date like we saw on the other Workmates that were made in Brockville. After seeing those first few with the same number there, I became oblivious to the fact that I began receiving photos of type 3s with different 3-digit numbers. Somehow I just didn't notice that they were different. What happened in August was that I got some photos from an owner, as I do on a regular basis. This was a type 3, and it had a slightly different stamp than the others. It had the code 637 at the start, but unlike others I had seen, there was a space after the 6. It was one of those unexpected moments where something just flashes into your brain. First, it was, that's a year and week number, followed almost immediately by a 6 for 1976 is the perfect year for a type 3. I rushed to check my library of photos, which includes 15 type 3s, 9 of them with readable ink stamps. All 9 of those fit the pattern, with 5 621s, 1 624, 1 629, and 2 637s. Regarding the use of only a 3-digit date code instead of the standard 5-digit one on the other Workmates, I believe I have a theory. I believe that the type 3s were stamped not when they were manufactured in Ireland, but after they arrived from Ireland in Brockville. Workers in Brockville, of course, did not know the exact date and work shift that any one of these imports had been made. They wanted to continue the practice of dating them, so they did it by using the year and week that they processed and packed them as an approximation, resulting in the truncated 3-digit code. So, based on that, I am now saying that type 3 was produced from approximately week 21 to 37, or May to September of 1976. This also fits perfectly with the start of production at the factory in Ireland that I mentioned a couple minutes ago.
I'll mention one more thing that the observant among you may have noticed. The Workmate on the right has its name written on the H-frame in mixed case with a capital W followed by lowercase letters, while the one on the left has its name in all caps. This variation is found throughout the production run of the WM625 line manufactured at the Kildare, Ireland factory. In a sample of about 50 WM625s that I checked, 2/3 of them used mixed case lettering, while 1/3 use all capital letters. The Canadian-made models that we're more used to seeing all used only capital letters. Wrapping this up, I've now finally owned beautiful examples of each of the 10 types of the Workmate 79001. I've also figured out the dates of production for each type, as well as when every change in components occurred. Along the way, my documentation of these and other vintage Workmates, including the UK models, has grown way beyond what I ever expected it would. I'm happy to finally say, mission accomplished. As always, please visit my website, hframe.weebly.com, which has far more information about vintage workmates than I can get into my videos.